All right, welcome to another episode of the Intrepid Global Citizen Podcast. We have a very special guest here named Laura Massey-Pugh, and she's going to talk about her Guinness World Record. She's one half of the team that set a Guinness World Record, and her new book called Backseat Rider. So welcome to the podcast.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so maybe we could start off. We could introduce yourself quickly. You and your
Yes.
husband. Yeah.
Yeah, so she said, my name's Laura and my husband is Stephen or Stevie. So we make up a team called Stella, so like Stevie and Laura, Stella Tandem. So yeah, and we hold the Guinness World Record for world circumnavigation by tandem bicycle.
Wow, that's really interesting. That's great. We have a lot to dive in here today. So maybe you can tell us about how did you get into cycling in the first place? How did you and Stevie become interested in cycling?
Yeah, so I'd always ridden a bicycle, but I used it like mainly to commute from, first at uni, then to and from work. So I didn't really do a lot of sporty cycling. Stevie was quite different, and from a young age, he'd done a lot of cycling. So I think he did his first 100-mile ride, aged 11 years old. So when I met him in 2015, he kind of got me into the more sporty side, the longer distance side, like the ultra distance side of things. But he also got me into tandem riding as well. So the kind of natural progression was to start riding tandems further and further and on longer events. And then, yeah, it kind of spiraled out of all control from there.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. I mean, you guys have done some pretty intense races. I mean, could you tell us about, I mean, before the record and everything, can you tell us like what was your life like? I mean, I understand you're a veterinarian, correct?
Yeah, I'm a veterinarian. So yeah, so I was very lucky to get a sabbatical from my job and be able to take some time off work. And Stevie's currently a house husband, so is a bit easier for him to kind of help with the preparations and everything. But yeah, we'd often be kind of out riding the bicycles at weekends. We ride solo bicycles as well, and a lot of our holidays would be around cycling and touring. And kind of challenging ourselves too. So before we did this trip, and part of the inspiration from it is we rode the length of the United Kingdom. So from Land's End, right down the bottom in Cornwall, right up to John O'Groats in Scotland and the north. And that was kind of, we did that in 10 days, and it's like 1,000 miles distance. So it was a pretty fast kind of tour. It was maybe not so much of a holiday, but yeah, we love kind of trying to push our limits on the bicycle.
Wow. So did you guys start off with your individual bicycles? And I assume that's how you guys started off, right? And then how did the progression go? I mean, how did you decide to ride tandem? Like, how did that work exactly?
Yeah, so Stevie already had a tandem. So when I met him, he was fairly quick to introduce the idea that we should start riding tandem bicycles together. And it took a little bit of time for me to kind of get my confidence up because I'm so used to having my own bicycle and doing my own steering, my own braking. It was actually, you have to have a lot of trust in the person sat on the front, because Stevie sits on the front of the bicycle, I sit on the back. So it took a little bit of time to kind of build that up, but once we did, yeah, we were just able to go further and further. And then depending on the nature of the ride and sometimes just like how we felt, we'd decide whether we were going to take the tandem bicycle or whether we were going to take solo bicycles, because there's like pros and cons to each of those.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. So what would you say the big pros and cons are? I mean, I've never gone on a tandem bike before for an extensive distance. And I mean, what is that? What is that like? You know?
Yeah, so I suppose kind of the advantages of it is it's a fantastic leveler. So Stevie's naturally a faster rider than I am. So if we ride solos, he has to either ride by himself, but he more normally backs off the pace so he can stay with me. Whereas on a tandem, you can both kind of put in the same effort and you're both moving at the same speed. It keeps you together as well, so you're not going to kind of get lost, but you can kind of chat and everything like that's a lot easier. But in some ways they can be kind of harder to ride, in particularly going uphill. They're quite a heavy bicycle, so you'll often go slower on a tandem if it's more rolling terrain, and they're quite a big thing to kind of maneuver as well. So if you're traveling and you need to get somewhere with the tandem, you kind of have to factor in that you can't just stick it on the back of a car or put it on a train, for example. It's quite a big unit to kind of move around.
Yeah, sure. Wow. So that's good. That's interesting. I mean, and you guys did some serious races, it sounds like, leading up to the event, right? Like 200, 300, 400K events. So could you tell us about like the training that led up to this Guinness World Record attempt?
Yeah, so we're part of a long distance cycling club called Audax. I believe there's kind of branches all the way around the world, even though it's a French organisation. So they measure all their rides in kilometres, and the quintessential distance starts with a brevet randonneur ride at 200 kilometres. And then to become a super randonneur in the same season, you ride a 200 kilometre, 300 kilometre, 400 kilometre, and 600 kilometre event. So we'd been doing that either on solo bikes or on the tandem for kind of a few years running, and that had really built up our endurance. And then things like the Land's End John O'Groats trip kind of built that up as well, kind of carrying camping weight. In terms of training, we just ride bikes all the time, so we don't kind of have a specific schedule. We just get out and ride, and either kind of faster, shorter spins, which are more high intensity, or the kind of longer distance stuff, which builds up our endurance for the long term.
Okay, wow. And when did you guys decide, like, and how did you decide to go after this record? What was that
Yeah,
decision-making process like?
yeah, we kind of I suppose we did the Land's End John O'Groats ride, which kind of set our idea that how far could we, or how long rather, can we ride 100 miles a day every day on a laden tandem. And we did that for 10 days and it was pretty tough, but it's like, well, I wonder how long this is sustainable for. And then just before kind of lockdown hit in Europe, we saw the women that hold the female tandem record. They came back in just before lockdown, and they set an amazing record, which was faster than the men's record. At that point, there was no kind of mixed team record, and they set an amazing record faster than the men's record at 263 days. And we thought, oh, that's pretty amazing, but I wonder if we could do it faster with the kind of ultra endurance experience we've got, and we've kind of proven that we can go pretty fast on a laden tandem. So if we could keep that up, I wonder if we could, kind of not just beat that record, but how fast could we go? And the Guinness rules for circumnavigation is you have to cover 18,000 miles. So if we were to do 100 miles a day, that worked out quite nicely at 180 days, and the 180 days around the world had quite a nice ring to it. It's not quite that straightforward, because once you start, the clock never stops. So every time you have to take a flight, for example, or if you get sick or have some sort of incident where you can't ride the bicycle, all that time has to come out of your kind of total time. So it was more like 108 miles a day that we averaged, but that was our starting point, was that 100 miles a day.
Wow. So, I mean, what was it like at first? Like just putting this whole thing together. It sounds like you guys have sponsors, charity, and everything. What was the organization process like?
Yeah, so from the time we kind of firmly decided we were going to give this a go to actually getting to the start line, it was 18 months in the planning. And kind of, yeah, getting all the sponsorships together was one thing. We actually we were self-funded financially. We didn't have a financial sponsor. So we paid for the whole trip ourselves, but we were really lucky to get some amazing sponsors that provided us with the kit we needed. And things like help with the custom build of the bike and all sorts of kind of bits like that. So yeah, really lucky to get some great sponsorships, some great companies. And yeah, we decided as well that we were going to try and raise as much money as possible for charity. So we supported Mind, which is the UK mental health charity. There's a charity called Vet Life that supports veterinarians and the veterinary profession. And then Sustrans, which is a UK charity supporting sustainable travel and promoting kind of active travel and active lifestyles.
Okay, wow, very nice, nice. And and you guys kept up 108 miles per day, that pace. I mean, what was that like? You said you did it you tried it for 10 days, right? But I'm sure there's a big difference going from 10 days to 179 days, right? You beat the record by, or your goal by about 12 hours is right.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really tough. And yeah, it wasn't like it was 108 days every day. Some days we'd do well and be doing like 120 miles a day. And then some days in kind of more challenging parts of the world, like some places in India are really challenging with the road service and things like that. We'd be down at 80 miles a day, and then you know that you've got to catch that up again on another day. So every day you go shorter, it's like, oh, there's this pressure that you need to catch that up. And we actually did what's called a negative split. So we'd had some sickness, we'd had an accident. There's all sorts of things at the first half of the trip that actually meant by the time we got to the halfway point, we were 6 days behind our target, or 600 miles behind where we needed to be. So we had to put in a massive effort through the second half of the trip to try and catch that up and try and kind of meet the target we'd set ourselves. So it was a massive effort, and it was really, really tough. It basically felt like having a really intense like full-time job where you get up, you have to do the same thing every day, day in, day out, but you don't get any break, you don't get any holiday, no weekends. There was no time off the bike, that was not essential, or that was kind of enforced upon us.
Wow, wow. And how did you guys deal with recovery? I'm sure, I mean, recovery is so important if you're doing something like this. I mean, I saw on your website that you said you had a whole range of accommodations from Airbnbs to wild camping. So, what percentage of the time would you say you were camping, like in the woods somewhere, and, and what percentage of the time were you able to get a nice shower and a good solid sleep?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. The recovery was such a big part of it, and we knew that from our experience beforehand. That if we didn't get the rest and recovery we needed, it wasn't going to be sustainable, and we weren't going to continue. So making sure we got enough sleep and rested our bodies as much as possible was vital, particularly towards the back end of the trip. Stevie was kind of suffering with kind of physical health issues a bit more. He had a lot of saddle sores. He had a problem with his knee, for example. So we have to kind of prioritize his recovery and just get him into motel rooms. And it's like we couldn't risk kind of camping at that point. It wasn't a holiday, so we couldn't take any time to enjoy ourselves. We just had to find the best place for him to recover, and it'd be get into the hotel room. We couldn't like go out for dinner or anything like that because it'd take more time. It would be like prioritizing getting ourselves fed, get everything washed, get us washed, get the clothes washed, and then kind of be getting to bed as soon as we could.
Wow, wow. So what were your daily routines? I mean, I'm sure no day is the same, but I mean, what was your goal usually to get out on the road and get started, and when would you usually finish, and what is an average, if I can say average, I know there isn't an average day, but I mean, what were you shooting for? when you first started, and what actually happened
Yeah.
when you were out there?
Yeah, I mean, it was very routine in a way, because I think that's the only way we were able to sustain what we were doing. So it depended on the daylight hours a lot, and we had, quite a few time zone changes. So the kind of the daily timings maybe weren't always quite the same, but I'd say we'd be getting up in the morning somewhere between like 5, 6 o'clock. The latest we'd really want to be on the road would be like 7 o'clock in the morning if it was light by then. But we'd get up, get something to eat, get everything packed up, get the bike ready. And then on an ideal day, we'd ride for like 30, 40 miles and then find somewhere to eat. But if there's no cafe, if there's no gas station, sometimes you'd either be eating on the side of the road or you'd have to ride further to get somewhere. And then ideally as well, we'd stop again in the afternoon if there was anywhere we could get more food. And then we'd be finishing up maybe like 5, 6 o'clock at night. So it was kind of it could be like 10 hours kind of on the bike, including stops and everything. And then, yeah, as I say, we'd just get in and the focus would be on, getting everything clean, fed, and kind of getting ready and getting our heads down for the next day. So, yeah, it was quite an intense schedule. There was kind of no time for anything outside of that, any time to enjoy ourselves or anything. It was quite relentless.
Yeah, and I think I read that you had cooking supplies too, but I don't know how that would work with your time schedule, or if it's probably faster just to stop at a restaurant, right, and order something.
Yeah, so in the day, definitely we were eating kind of fast food in the day, because we couldn't wait to sit and cook up something on the side of the road. So we'd be grabbing like sandwiches, burgers, whatever we could find and whatever was available. We Even at night we didn't really do so much cooking. If we got to a motel room with a microwave, that was great, because then we could kind of make fresher food, because we were quite conscious we needed to focus on, trying not to eat too much junk food, trying to keep the vitamins, minerals, micronutrients up as well. So, we could microwave some pasta, some vegetables. That was really good. But we had a tiny little stove, but that was kind of like for backup. So there's some places where it was so remote that there wouldn't be an accommodation option, particularly places like the Nullarbor Desert in Australia. If there was nowhere within kind of a reasonable distance to the 100 miles we needed to do every day, or 108 miles, and we couldn't stop at 50 miles because that was the only place to stay. And then if the next place wasn't till another 200 miles or something, we'd have to camp the night. And then, yeah, we would kind of cook up some noodles and just get a hot drink and things like that. So we didn't do kind of much camp cooking, but it was there for when we needed it as an emergency, to make sure that we could get kind of fed and get warm food if we needed to.
Okay, wow. And it sounds like you guys also, you had to deal with a variety of different weather conditions. So what would you say the toughest weather condition that you encountered on the trip was?
Yeah, I think we had all the weather. The monsoon in India was really, really tough, because the rain was just relentless. It made it hard to ride the bicycle on the roads, and it just like the water coming out the sky. I just couldn't believe it. And it caused us problems as well. It makes you more prone to getting sickness, which we did. And it gave me a nasty case of foot rot. So that was pretty bad. Some places where it was really hot in Southeast Asia, it was really hard to try and stay hydrated and keep our electrolytes up. That was like a constant battle and constant challenge. And then as well in Canada, it got really cold, like less than 10 degrees Celsius. So it was absolutely bitterly cold. And we were like having to wear everything we'd got. Stevie had got like some down slippers or booties. He put them on his hands so he could still kind of feel the gear levers and the brake levers and everything. So yeah, there was a lot of challenging weather out there, and wind direction is everything. If we've got a headwind day, we'd have to factor in we weren't going to be able to ride the bike as far as we would on a tailwind day.
Wow. So you guys, I was looking at the map, you guys were in southern India too, right? And during monsoon season. So that's the summertime. So that's pretty crazy
Yeah,
in and of itself right there, I think.
yeah, and it's one of these things. if you're trying to pick your timing of when you go, there's like no ideal time all the way around the world where the weather's just going to be perfect for you. And the monsoons came a little bit early and heavier than they were expected to around Mumbai in particular. So we kind of got caught a bit there. The temperatures dropped in Canada a bit earlier than expected. So yeah, it's a bit of a juggling act between trying to predict the weather patterns around the world and try and guess the right time to go.
Wow, wow. Yeah, I was in Pakistan this past summer, and it got up to like 45 with a heat index of 52
Yeah.
and trying to cycle. Yeah, it can really be dangerous. I mean, did you have any heat stroke scares like when you're cycling at those temperatures? It's really, it's like a sauna that you can't escape. That's how I would describe my experience in Pakistan. Um,
Yeah, we were quite lucky. We didn't get quite that high in terms of temperature. So, and that was quite intentional as well. We tried not to end up anywhere it's likely to be that hot. But it was still a challenge to, keep hydration and everything up. But yeah, it was more the other end. So particularly as well, when we got back to Europe, the weather was getting worse here, and because it was very wet as well in Canada, it had been cold but dry. And back into Europe, it wasn't anywhere near as cold, but because we were getting a lot of wet weather, it was actually on day 177 of our trip. We were just within that close to the Brandenburg Gate, but we had to stop at 55 miles because we got so wet and so cold. Stevie was so hypothermic, the whole bike was shaking as he shook, and for our own safety, we just had to go, no, we can't take this risk. We have to get in somewhere warm and dry and reassess the situation.
Wow, wow. So that was on day 177 then?
Yeah.
Wow. So what was going through your head? I mean, you're so close to this record, right? And then the head cyclist, the guy at the head, your husband, he's got potentially hypothermia. I mean, what was going through your head at that point? Yeah.
Yeah, it was really tough, and but I think it was so bad. It was just obvious that safety had to take priority. We weren't going to get any record if things got that dangerous, and if things had got any worse. I think so. It was really tough to make that decision, but we both knew it was the right decision, was to stop and reassess. And by doing that, we did get some more rest and recovery, and we could get back on track again. But at the end of the day, yeah, we knew that we weren't going to get any record unless we got ourselves on the bike safely across the finish line. So we had to make kind of some tough judgment calls.
Yeah, sure. And I was reading as well on your website that there was a motorcycle collision or something happened during the ride. So what was that about exactly?
Yeah, so that was in Malaysia. And yeah, that was the other time that it was really tough. And that was the only time I think we might have called the whole thing off. And it was basically it was a motorcycle with two young men riding fairly recklessly. And they came in and collided with us from behind. They ripped all the pannier bags off the one side of the bike. I had some really bruised ribs, and we got some fairly nasty bumps and scrapes. But the only thing that saved us was we landed like in a grass verge. So we had a soft landing, otherwise it'd have been a lot worse. But it was really made us think that there's always an inherent risk of riding a bicycle on a road with motor vehicles, and doing that every day for 6 months. That level of risk is obviously a lot higher that something is going to happen, and something did happen. And at that point, we really had to think, well, do we want to take this risk to get this record? And yeah, at the time, we weren't in a mind frame to make that decision. We were about 3 days away from Singapore airport, so we kind of had to take a day off to fix the bike and get all our wounds seen to. And then yeah, we decided to ride to Singapore, and then make our minds up when we got there as to whether we even wanted to continue riding. But by the time we got there, we'd built our confidence a little bit more, and we decided we want to continue to ride across Australia.
Wow, wow. So you had you guys were really banged up. I mean, how was the recovery from that? I mean,
Yeah, it was pretty tough. I had like quite a chunk out of my elbow that I needed to do like wound dressings on for like the next couple of weeks. Luckily, my veterinarian skills came in there that I knew the dressings and how to kind of look after that. But Stevie had some nasty kind of scabs on his knuckles that when he was changing gear and everything, it was really tough, and my ribs kind of that affected like my rest and my sleep quite a lot because it really hurt kind of breathing lying down and everything. So it was really impactful. But I think because we'd come so far and once we made the decision to continue, it was like, well, that this is part and parcel of the trip. We just need to kind of power on through these things.
Wow, wow. And it psychologically too, I mean, I'm sure you guys had some like PTSD from that. I mean, anybody would, right? From getting hit from behind by a motorcycle, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And the scariest thing was going across to Singapore. The bridges, there's nowhere that's really made for pedal cyclists. So they funneled us into this lane with all the motorcyclists, and it was just like the worst thing for me at that point because I've got all these motorcyclists coming right past us from behind, and it was like, oh, trying to get it out of my head, the same thing is going to happen again. Yeah, once we were over that short bridge, Singapore was a lot quieter, and then getting to Australia because we flew into Western Australia. It's quite a rural sort of place, and the roads there are a lot empty. It felt completely different. So I think having that switch to a different country, a different culture, really kind of helped kind of us readjust and kind of get over that kind of chaos that had been riding in Southeast Asia because the roads there are crazy. Just everything and anything goes on. Whereas, yeah, Australia felt a lot more kind of westernized to us and like the roads we're used to riding on in the UK, for example.
Wow, wow. And so you guys did you go to the hospital in Malaysia when that collision happened, or was it you just did your worked your veterinarian skills and that was it, or
No, we had some medical assistants. So yes, we had some qualified doctors that we had contact with before the trip, and they worked in kind of extreme medicine as well. So they kind of knew expedition medicine, and it was quite specific. So we're really lucky to be able to get some help and advice from them. One of them was actually a fellow tandem rider, so was able to kind of help us out and relate to what we're doing. And we had a discussion about whether we needed to go to the hospital or not, but we kind of sensed that might have its own complications in Malaysia, and I didn't want to like end up confined to a hospital bed for 3 days if we could keep moving safely. So we weighed up the pros and cons, spoke to the professionals, and made the decision to keep going and kind of to manage things as best we could by ourselves.
okay. And then you went to from there to Australia
Mm.
and then so you had long stretches like on your own. So what was the transition like from being in Southeast Asia where it's crowded and noisy and motorcycles like you said and you have to worry about traffic to just open roads with probably this was the summertime too, right? Or so it was I mean
Yeah, it
well
was like Australian spring, but it was quite
okay.
cold there. They're not
Okay.
normally that cold. But that was like a breath of fresh air because we'd had that intense, as you say, everything about Asia is intense. The humidity is intense, the temperature is intense, all the people, all the motors, and then it was like a breath of fresh air getting to Western Australia. Got these big long roads, the temperature was so much cooler. We weren't sweating buckets all the time, and like green countryside as well. It looked a lot more familiar to us, and it just felt like a breath of fresh air. And I think that really kind of helped us keep going. Eventually, like when we got to the Nullarbor Desert fairly soon to get into Australia, and then it was just like the same views for days and days on end. So that felt quite relentless after about a week in. But initially, yeah, it was a massive relief to get to Australia because everything felt a lot calmer. But then, yeah, it had its own challenges as well.
Okay. And were you able to make up, you said at one point you were 600 miles behind. So were you able to make that up in Australia or Or how
We
did you
made
guys end up
some
making
of
that up?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we made some of it up in Australia. But yeah, we were still it was about 3 or 4 days by the end of Australia, I think. And then as well, because we only had a short stint in New Zealand, but every time you take a flight, all that time comes out of your budget as well. So we had like 8.5 days in New Zealand and we flew through there. But again, it was hard to make time up there. So we did the bulk of it in Canada. So by the time we left Canada, we were just about on, the point of 100 miles a day to get back to Germany and Berlin.
Okay. And then through Canada, that's when you dealt with the cold, right? So you were able to stay on that pace despite like excuse me, -10 Celsius in Canada. Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Wow.
And we had some days, it felt like a lot of the days was always a headwind, but in Canada, we had like 2 days where we just had immense tailwinds through the prairies. So that was when we managed to get our longest day in, and we did 157 miles in one day without it being kind of any longer on the bike. We were just going so fast. It was amazing. So things like that helped us catch up, but it was still tough, and we still had a load of really long days in Canada. And it was still, but at that point we were so committed because of all the other adversities we'd come through, so like the monsoon in India, and the crash in Malaysia, everything like that. Every time we overcame one of these problems and these issues, it kind of almost made it harder to give up and to quit, because it's like, well, what have we done that for if we're not going to give it everything we've got?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, yeah, that's the weather conditions can really set you back, but that's amazing that you guys were able to keep that up despite all of those setbacks. And how about the mechanical issues? So Stevie, I understand he's pretty handy when it comes to bike mechanics, right? So
Yeah, he's amazing. So the bicycle didn't go into a bike shop. It didn't see a mechanic all the way around the world. He maintained the bicycle all the way, changed any parts that needed changing, fixed anything that needed fixing. But we did have a couple of mechanical issues towards the back end of the trip, just because these parts have been used for so many thousands of miles. It's like way further than they'd normally be used for. So we had an issue with the free hub just before getting to Halifax, and we had to get that new part sent out urgently. And it was, again, kind of like, are we going to be able to make this flight? Are we going to miss the flight? And then even after that day, 177, when Stevie got hypothermic, on like the last evening, the rear wheel bearings seized up, and basically, the rear wheel wouldn't keep turning properly. So the night before we got to Berlin, we ended up having to take the wheel into a bike shop to get that fixed and to get a new set of wheel bearings put in there. So that was a big stress. And we kind of we it was like 7 o'clock in the evening, and this bike shop stayed open and fixed it for us. And we still had 160 miles to go, which would have been too far to ride the next day. We just wouldn't have been able to do that. So we got back on the bike 8 o'clock that evening, rode for another 40 miles, got to where we're staying at midnight, and then we got up at 4 a.m. just to make sure that we could still kind of get within our 180-day target. So it was really challenging right up to that last day.
wow. And tell us about like the last few moments. I mean, you're almost at the end. I mean, that must have been really like just bittersweet. Here you are struggling and it's all coming to an end. Did you want it to end, or did you really just want to keep going? I mean, what was the feeling like? I mean, when you're almost at this record in the last few hours, I mean, what's that like?
Yeah, I mean, we wanted it to end. We were done. We were just so tired because we'd given it everything. I think if we'd got to the end and wanted to keep going, I think we'd have questioned, had we really given it all? But no, there's no doubt we needed it done. And in my head, because you think about this moment almost every day for the whole, 180 days. And in my head, we come rolling in, and the Brandenburg Gate arches are like these big, massive arches, and friends and family would be there, they'd be cheering us, it'd be like sunshine, and we get all these amazing photos and have a big celebration like there. As it was, because of the problems we had within like the last couple of days, by the time we got there, it was pitch black at night. It was also snowing, like a proper blizzard, and it was also a headwind too. So we were just struggling to get there. And it's this big, long road into the center of Berlin. It's really straight. So it felt like it was going on and on and on forever. And like, I kept thinking, when is it going to finish? When's it going to finish? And then the traffic gets busier again. And we started feeling anxious about that, because we've been so, it's so important to get there safely. We're like, we can't have an accident now. We've got to be so careful. We can't let anything slip at the last. And then, massive relief. And I finally looked up and I saw these big golden arches at the gate. We were just so relieved we got there in one piece and safe. And then we rolled through, and we did have friends and family there who'd been waiting for us, but because we were later than we'd hoped to be, basically everybody there was freezing cold. We were getting freezing cold because of the blizzard. So we kind of got like one photo and we're like, right, we've all got to get straight to the hotel and get warm. So it wasn't anticlimactical as such, but it was nothing like I thought it would be in my head, because it was like right to the line of, we've just got to get this done.
Wow. So the end was like the climax, the struggle just didn't stop until the end.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow.
It really pushed us to the end. Yeah.
Wow, that's hardcore. And so you get to the hotel, right? I'm sure you get in you take a hot shower, right? And you maybe go to sleep. You go to sleep early, and then the next few days, I mean, what's it like? I mean, did you have some celebrations there, or was it just focusing on recovery? Like, I don't want to celebrate. I just want my bed and some food and a hot tea, or what was it like the few days after that?
Yeah, I mean, actually, that evening, we had some friends that we weren't expecting to be there. They kind of came as a surprise. So we got warm. We put on like different clothes, like normal, not cycling clothes, which are the first ones we'd worn for like 6 months. So it felt amazing to just wear something different. And then we went out for dinner, and some friends turned up we didn't expect to be there. And then, having been like completely exhausted, that kind of flicked a switch for us, and we're like, oh my god, this is amazing. So we did go out and had like a little celebration that night. But over the coming days, like we still had to like get the bike back home, and we had like a really nice reception at our local pub. Everybody came out to see us there. But then after that, we basically got back to our own house, and we just got in and closed the door. And for about a week, we just like had to just decompress and just kind of try and get our head around what had happened. So it was really weird trying to like readjust.
Wow. That's amazing. And so, all right, so then I mean, you've got all this experience on the tandem bike, and you've done a lot of races. I mean, what would you tell people that are thinking about, going on a tandem cycling tour like around the world? What advice would you give them?
Do it slower than us and enjoy it.
All right.
But no, it was this wasn't like a holiday for us, but I think a tandem is a brilliant way to see the world, particularly like as a couple, because as I say, it matches your ability. So if somebody's a stronger rider, somebody's not, it keeps you together. It doesn't mean you've got less space, because even though we had 4 panniers on the bike, that's 4 panniers between 2 people as opposed to 4 panniers per person. But it's really doable. And tandems make people smile, they're quite a rare thing. And you get a really good response to traveling by tandem bicycle. They're a great way to kind of see the world like that. We really enjoy kind of touring on them. But for the record attempt and everything we had to put into it, it was a lot of preparation, and it was a lot of day-to-day like logistical stuff. It meant that it made things a lot harder, because we couldn't be like relaxed about where we're going to stay and where we're going to stop and what we're going to eat. That all had to be like planned every day, and we could only plan so far ahead, because with the conditions, the weather, things like that, that could kind of impact where we stopped, where we stayed. So it was very full on trying to stay on top of everything.
Okay, wow. And I'm sure you, like you said, you were drawing a lot of attention. I can imagine what it's like going in, cycling in southern India with a tandem bike, and your husband's got this long beard. He kind of looks like a sadhu, right? So, I mean, what was that the attention like there, especially in a place like India?
Yeah, so they were just, yeah, they'd never seen the light before. And yeah, like the selfie culture there as well is just immense. There's so many people like wanting selfies and things. But they'd often want us to stop. So they'd come past, the little chuggy motorcycles and be like, selfie, selfie, stop, we stop. I'm like, no, no, no. And we're like, we were trying to find a way to explain to them. We didn't want to be rude, but at the same time, this happened like dozens of times a day. So we'd have just got nowhere if we'd stopped. So we have to like come up with it. So eventually we used to go, no, 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 I'm sorry. We are racing. We are racing. We can't stop. We are in a race, because we kind of were. And then, yeah, they'd still probably try and take a selfie of us from their moped. But yeah, but if we stopped anywhere, yeah, people would like surround us pretty quickly. But yeah, we kind of accepted that we looked very strange to them and that people were just kind of interested. But overall, people were so friendly that yeah, it was great.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And okay, so then you get home, you finished with the trip, you take a week to decompress, and now when did you start writing your book, and how was the writing process?
Yeah, that was quite cathartic. So we had to provide quite a lot of evidence to Guinness. So we had to not just like our GPX files, but like we had to provide signed witness statements, bank statements, passports, photos, video footage. There's all this stuff. So it took me about a month to compile all of that. So we got back at the beginning of December. I think it's January before I got that submitted. And that was the point I started to kind of put pen to paper, or start typing and started putting the book together. And it took me about till August to kind of get it all down, but I was really keen to get it done quite quickly, because you forget so much. And even now, we might talk about a specific day and we have different recollections of it, and it's like, oh my goodness, that happened that day. It's just so much happened in that 6 months kind of time period. It was amazing.
Yeah, did you have like a journal with you, or that you could like take notes every day, like at the end of the day? I mean, it must have been hard just being so tired at the end of the day, and you just get the journal out and you really want to fall asleep, but also you want to take records, I'm sure too, and have that material.
Yeah, and that's part of the Guinness requirements, is what they wanted, like a daily
Oh,
log or a
okay.
daily diary. So, but that fitted quite well, because then what I did was I'd just type up some notes in the day with some photos and I'd post them to social media, because we'd got quite a few people following us as well. So I did like a daily blog, and then did that as a weekly blog on our website. So yeah, it wasn't always perfect. There's quite a few typos in there because I would be quite tired, but it served dual purpose as to keeping like everybody following us updated, and did like the Guinness requirements. But then I did keep a few just like separate notes as well. Sometimes we were not always completely transparent with what was going on, because we didn't want to like not ruin, but we didn't want to scare friends and family. So some things we kind of played down quite a lot at the time. So through the book, I was kind of able to explain those a lot more once we were home and dry and safe.
Okay, okay. Wow. And how was it? I mean, how was the book writing process? I mean, I went through it myself too, and boy, for me, it was a painstakingly long, just editing and editing and editing. And I mean, what was it like for you to write the
Yeah,
book?
because I'd got those notes, that was really helpful. And we kind of obviously went through a few drafts. And then people always go, "Oh, did Stevie write it?" But no, I wrote this, but he went through it and helped edit it. But then we always say he might follow up with his own version of events, and we'll see how different they are. But yeah, it was good. And I kind of find it came quite naturally at the time, I think, because it was so soon after the event. So it wasn't easy, but I kind of enjoyed it. And it was like the next challenge, I suppose, as well. It was a completely different focus.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it's nice. You can, I'm sure, just reflect and really think about what happened, right? And digest everything. I mean, you guys were going at such a fast pace, right? And so,
Yeah, it really helped with processing everything, I think, was to kind of go through that and get it all on paper and kind of go, oh my goodness, this really happened.
yeah, yeah. Wow, that's great. And so how was your book launch? I understand you just had a book launch last week, right? So how did it go?
Yeah, that's been brilliant. So, one of our sponsors down in Derby, where we live in the UK, they hosted us, and yeah, we had a load of people come there, and then came up to our local pub again just to finish off the evening. So that was brilliant. And then over the past week, we've kind of toured a few places in the UK and given some talks, and that's been fantastic as well. It's been really well received, and it feels like we're finally kind of like celebrating what we've done, because at the time when we got home, it was like we're so almost shell shocked. It was really hard to celebrate our achievement because we hadn't processed it yet. Whereas now we're at the point of going, wow, this is what we did. This is us, and this is amazing. So yeah, we're really proud and we're really kind of happy to have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, well, congratulations on the book and of course the Guinness record as well. And so I saw you also have a podcast, so maybe you can tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, so we did that in the run up to the trip, and basically I spoke to a lot of people from the worlds of long distance and endurance cycling, some tandem riders as well, and it was a really good way to kind of get any tips and tricks and anybody that had done anything similar, and really kind of good way of getting our heads in the right mindset and kind of zone to think about taking on a trip like this. So yeah, it was really good fun to do, and it was a really good way to kind of promote the trip as well.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, sure. I mean, what did you learn? I mean, from you have all these experts, right, that have done similar things. So what were the big tips that they or advice or wisdom that they shared with you on the podcast?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, there were so many. I'd have to go and listen to it all again. But
Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
there was so like really little things like we actually interviewed the ladies that had the female record. They very kindly gave us some of their time, and one of their top tips, which is quite a small thing but made a big difference, was getting SPD sandals. So sandals that would clip to the pedals of our bike. Normally, we just have normal cycling shoes that did that, but for Asia, having these sandals was an absolute godsend, because it was they were so much more breathable, and in the monsoon it meant your feet weren't like swimming all the time, and when it was really hot it meant you could kind of like dry them and get air to them. So yeah, a little tip like that, absolutely amazing. Right through to like Mark Beaumont, who's the solo bike male record holder. It's just amazing to be able to speak to him with all his experience, because he's actually done it twice. He's the only person to have twice got the Guinness World Record for cycling around the world. So he'd got all the tips. But I think his ones were kind of what we took from him was like mindset. So he, for his his 80-day, but he didn't like 78-day record. He said, I didn't go out trying to beat the record that was already set. I went out to ride it as fast as I could, and I built it up from there. And that's what we ended up doing with 180 days. We didn't go out to be the fastest tandem around the planet. We went to see how fast we could do it. And that really helped us kind of meet our goal and make that target. It was like a different way of looking at it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that changes everything, right? Because then you're competing with yourself, right, instead of the record and
Yeah,
pushing
yeah, yeah.
yourself to the limit, right?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think if we hadn't been doing that, I think we would have gone slower. I think we would have found a reason, we'd have used the reasons we had to go, oh, we only need to do this in like 200 days or 250 days. Whereas because we'd set ourselves a goal, yeah, we knew we held ourselves accountable to that.
Yeah. Wow, interesting. So, okay, that's great. And so you guys are going on speaking, like a speaking tour now, and what's next for you guys after? Yeah, I mean, you've done the record, you have the book going, the speaking tour. I mean, what are your plans for the future?
Yeah, so I mean, for us, this was our Everest. We're never going to do anything like this again. 6 months away from family and friends was a big deal. So yeah, we won't go away for so long, and also financially as well. It was super expensive to do this, so that's kind of like our Everest. But as I say, one of the things we missed out on was this, like actually be able to tour on the bike and take time and enjoy places. So over the next year, we really hope to take the Tandem on holiday touring and be able to spend more time, enjoy culture, meet people, and take it a lot slower. That's really important to us, is to kind of regain that. But I think we'll do different challenges, smaller challenges, maybe something on solo bike, or I've just started getting into triathlon, so different things. And I think we don't want to be like a one trick pony. We want to kind of keep doing things different and have different, and I think I think that's important, is not to become stuck in the same thing all the time.
Sure. Yeah, that's good. So great. And so if people are listening to this and they're interested in learning more about you guys, how can they follow you and how can they find you?
Yeah, so as you found out, there's loads of information on our website, which is just simply www.stellatandem.com. Stella's just with one L, so STLA. And then we're on social media, mainly I'd say kind of Facebook and Instagram under Stella Tandem. But the website will link you into like all the podcasts and things like that. And there's also a link on the website as well, where our book is available too. So we should be able to ship that internationally as well. But any problems with that, you can drop us a line, or if anybody wants to know more about tandem cycling, yeah, you can get in contact via the website or social media. And we're always happy to chat about things like that.
Sure. Great. All right. Well, any concluding conclusion you'd like to say to our audience that are listening out there, that you'd like to finish with, some words of wisdom or inspiration?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's just, yeah, really grateful to have this opportunity. And yeah, I think I'd say, even if it's not tandem riding, I think, moving by bicycle is a fantastic way to see the world. Yeah, we didn't necessarily get to make the most of that on this record attempt. I'd recommend that anybody gives it a go, gets on the bicycle, and kind of travels at those speeds. Seeing the world at the speed of a bicycle is an amazing thing. And you don't need to go around the whole world. You can travel a very small part of it and have some amazing experiences.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree, 100%. All right. Well, thank you for coming on, Laura. So go check out their book. It's called Backseat Rider, and you can find it on their website and listen to their podcast too. So, all right. Thanks for coming on tonight, this morning for you and evening for me here. And all right, we can finish it there.
Thanks so much.